Well, again, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. On behalf of Future Africa, we are very grateful for your presence here as we get to see our Future Africa Fellows present the policies that they've been working on. To begin with, my name is Teranya Senginga, and I am the Director of Future Africa. Today, we come to the culmination of work that our Fellows of Future Africa have been doing for the past year or so. In April last year, we brought 20 young leaders from more than 10 African countries together to discuss really crucial issues in the public policy sector, particularly along the themes of democratic governance, election, corruptions, and many other themes that fall within our focus sectors. 5 months ago, the fellows were then grouped into 3 of our focus sectors. These are education, entrepreneurship and employability, natural resource management. And they were challenged to design and propose a policy on an African issue. Today, we're here to do just that. Our fellows will have a chance, just shortly after introducing a few important key people for today, to present the policies they're working on and share with you how they see them being implemented. With that said, we've also invited a few external guests along with others who have joined us today to evaluate the policies and their presentations. And so I'd like to introduce them shortly before we begin. Our guests today who will be part of our panel are Mr. Abel Mukulama, Ms. Muthoni Kahuo, and Mr. Lukman Yassin. I'll briefly read the bio, and I ask that if possible, that they perhaps share their video and show their face. I believe it's very important to see faces to the names. In that way that if we ever pass across the street, we don't act like strangers and we act as if we've seen each other, greetings and passing. And so I'll begin with Mr. Abel Mukulama. Abel is a commitment mentor at the Clinton Global Initiative University. He is passionate about the adoption of digital agriculture innovations in Africa and co-founded an initiative that uses drone data to help smallholder farmers adapt to the impacts of climate change. Abel graduated from the Coastal Science and Policy Master's Program at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where he is also a board member of the Alumni Council. He leads programs that build schools, libraries, computer labs in Malawi. Abel also does research in digital agricultural technologies and clean cook stoves, and has contributed to processes for development of policies on climate change in Malawi. Abel was awarded the 2021 Verizon CGIU Social Innovation Challenge on Climate Change for his work on digital agricultural technologies. Mr. Abel Mukulama, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Ms. Muthoni Kahuo. Muthoni is an international development practitioner with a strong focus on social development, particularly in the field of health. She currently works as a program officer within the executive office of the African Union Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC. Muthoni is dedicated to supporting the development and implementation of the Ministerial Executive Leadership Program, MELP, which is a tailored program for health ministers aimed at refining political strategy for transformative leadership through the new public health order for Africa. Muthoni brings a wealth of experience to her role, having previously worked with notable organizations such as UNESCO, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kenya, and the Office of the Member of Parliament for Madhyoya constituency. Her diverse professional background has provided her with valuable insights into the complexities of international development, public policymaking, and analysis. As a Shabning Scholar, Muthoni holds a master's degree in conflict security development and project planning and management. Complementing academic achievements, she also earned a bachelor's degree in political science. Passionate about global health policies and development, Muthoni is committed to advancing initiatives that improve health outcomes and empower communities worldwide. Her work within the Africa CDC and dedication to Ministerial Executive Leadership Program reflects her drive to foster transformative leadership and shape effective strategies for achieving sustainable impact in the field of public health on the continent. Muthoni also happens to be an alumni of the Future Africa Fellowship of 2022. Thank you, Ms. Kahuo, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And our third panelist, Mr. Lukman Yassin. Lukman is an educationist and a researcher based in Somalia. He works as a researcher at East Africa University, focusing on access to quality education, promotion of online learning, accommodation of students with special needs, and teacher satisfaction. Lukman has received recognition for his work, including being the awardee of PBKM Award. He was also in the same cohort as Muthoni as a Future Africa Fellow in 2022. Currently, he's an Al Shark Fellow and also leads the Tolma Changemaker Fellowship, a 5-month-long advancement program empowering youth through knowledge acquisition, startup development, leadership, and skill enhancement in Somalia. Thank you, Mr. Yassin, for being here with us.
Thank you, Netrai, and I look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you very much. A brief housekeeping rule for all those joining us here today. We would like to ask that if you're not speaking, to turn off your mic. This is just to ensure that there's less interruptions during the presentations and during the discussions, and for the recording as well. As the agenda stands today, we will go through each presentation and each team will have 20 minutes to present their policy, and then an additional 10 minutes to discuss and have received questions from both the panelists and you as guests who are joining us today. At the end of those presentations, we'll go in alphabetical order. We'll then have the panels give concluding remarks regarding the presentations, the policies, and how they can further improve them as fellows. We'll then conclude any last remarks from us as Future Africa, and that'll be the end of our session. With that said, we'll begin with education, followed by entrepreneurship and employability, and conclude with natural resource management. I'll now hand over to the education team to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Ayomide, and I'm representing the education policy team, and we would be talking about our policy area today is on quality education, and we are focused on reducing out-of-school children in Nigeria. My team members are Rachel, Fortsin, and Inferista. So we have worked on this presentation together. I'm only representing them. According to Nelson Mandela, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, which basically means that if you are targeting promoting good health and well-being, trying to resolve climate change, or improve agricultural productivity, education is basically the key, which is one of the reasons why we have focused on this policy area today. Okay, so this is the structure of our presentation. We're just going to go through this main content and take it to the end of it. So, why are we choosing to focus on the education policy? Following my quotes, there's been a global commitment to ensuring quality education for all people, especially children and youth globally. Which is the major reason why we have chosen to focus on this policy, because following that commitment, there's been lots of issues that requires urgent attention. One of those issues is the problem of out-of-school children. Globally, there are over 200 million people, children and youth particularly, who are out of school. Amongst this population, almost 10%, about 20 million, are located in Nigeria. Therefore, Nigeria represents the country with one of the largest numbers of out-of-school children globally. And in Africa, it stands as the country with the most number of out-of-school children. Within Nigeria, Lagos also accounts for a huge population of out-of-school children, representing about 10% of the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. And children and youths, basically. So these people represent people between the ages of 6 to 18 years old who are unable to access education for so many reasons. For so many of you who may not be familiar with Nigeria, let me provide a bit of context as to where I'm talking about. Nigeria is an African country located in the West African region. It's made up of 36 states, which comprises of diverse people of diverse ethnicities and religion. In terms of population, it's over 200 million in terms of population size, making it the country with the largest population in Africa and one of the countries with the largest population globally. Economically, the country is also one of the strongest in the continent, with a GDP of over 477 billion US dollars, shows the strength of Nigeria's economy. But then the question is, does this translate to human development? As you can see from the figures I have pointed out to you today, one of the areas of human development is education. And Nigeria still accounts, like I've mentioned, accounts for one of the countries with one of the most in the world. Therefore, you can basically see that despite its large economic size, population size, there are still problems in terms of human development, which is the reason why we have focused, another major reason why we have focused on this policy area to address this urgent challenge faced by this country. Now, another question is, what are the problems that have resulted to this this large number of out-of-school children, despite the strong economic size, the large human resources? There's been a supply and demand side problem where you have problems such as inadequate funding, you have issues of barriers to education, maybe such as inadequate infrastructures, improper, inaccessible environments, and so many of the problems you can see here. These problems have caused or led to the number of people, or the large number of people who are unable to attend primary and secondary schools in the country. There's been policies that have come up to address this problem. Two of them is one, the National Policy on Education, another is the Universal Basic Education. These policies were enacted to resolve or reduce this number of children and youths who are unable to access education. However, despite the attempts to address this problem by these policies, there's still some gaps or some problems that these policies face. Some of them include poor budgetary allocations, exclusion of key stakeholders, or neglect of specific demographic groups. So for example, if you look at the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria, there are about 10 million recorded by the country. However, if you look at the United Nations Education, that's UNESCO, you realize that there are 20 million. So it means that some youths who are supposed to be accounted for being education are not accounted for by this policy, because the policy only looks at people from primary school to junior secondary school, leaving out another 10 million people from senior secondary school from SS1 to the end of senior secondary school out of this policy. Doesn't account for them, so therefore it doesn't really address their problems. Now, based on this problem, we have certain rationales as to why we have focused on these policies. One of the rationale, like I have mentioned from the beginning, is the global commitment. So, like so many other nations across the world, Nigeria has committed to ensure that all children and youths can access quality education. So we have kind of aligned ourselves to be able to meet up with these commitments where we still lag behind in. Secondly, looking at our study area particularly, like I've mentioned, Nigeria is made up of 36 states. We are focusing on Lagos State, which accounts for one of the highest, not the highest in the country, but one of the highest with out-of-school children. However, Lagos is the economic capital of Nigeria, which means that it boasts significant amounts of financial resources, but then still accounts for this problem. So basically, this is another rationale as to why we have chosen Lagos State in line with the global commitments. And then thirdly, it's a matter of urgency to solve this problem. Like I have said from the beginning, if you solve the problem of education, you as well solve the problems of so many other developmental areas, including health, including power, including social cohesion. So therefore, this is the rationale as to why we have focused on this policy area, or rather, why we have proposed this policy area. In terms of the contents or components of our policy, the vision basically is to ensure that all children and youths between the ages of 3 to about 16 years, which marks like the age range where you attain the highest secondary school education certification. basically. So our vision is to ensure that they have access to not just quality education, but inclusive and equitable quality education, whereby those people who are vulnerable, those people in terms of disability or in terms of economic status, would be able to access at least equal level of education as to their components who are not in these vulnerable positions. Our mission basically is to provide sustainable, inclusive, equitable quality education to all ranges of people. The goal is to reduce the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria by the year 2035. In terms of the objectives, we want to increase access. One, we want to increase access to inclusive and equitable quality education to not just the able-bodied or less vulnerable people, but to also capture the vulnerable people. We also want to increase enrollment in pre-primary education. And thirdly, we want to promote public awareness and advocacy on the importance of investing in education at primary, secondary, and pre-primary level. We have some guiding principles to this policy. One is to ensure that sustainable and equitable as well as inclusive education are promoted. Two is multi-sectoral partnership in terms of the development and implementation of this policy. And three is to respect the rights of children. In terms of the scope, it would involve all children between 3 years old and 16 years old at different levels of primary and secondary education. Also, at this early stages of our policy development, we are just focusing on Lagos State, not the whole Nigeria. So that's also part of the scope of our policy for now. This policy would cut across different stakeholders, including teachers, parents, the federal and state governments, as well as non-state education actors, including private sector practitioners. In terms of how the policy would be implemented, we're going to use some sustainable materials, such as makeshift classrooms to reduce distance, because like I have mentioned from the beginning, in terms of the barriers or the problems that people face as to why they are unable to access education at primary or secondary school level is problem of access to education itself, and some of it includes distance to the school, lack of infrastructures, and things like that. Or even when the school is within, people who are vulnerable or persons with disability may not be able to access due to structural barriers. So therefore, we're going to use makeshift classrooms to reduce distance to school, solving the distance problem. We would ensure security as well. We would also use, one of the problems governments face is financing. So therefore, we are going to use an innovative financing whereby we would involve both public and private partnerships into the development or implementation of this policy. As well, another problems that schools face or educators face is in terms of the training level of the teachers. So our policy is also going to ensure enhanced teacher training. Yes, the budgetary allocation would also be increased. Currently, the current budgetary allocation for education in the country and as well as in the states of focus is very low, is way lower than the 15 to 20% proposed by the United Nations. And then would increase our campaigns, because even for due to poor or low education among certain, maybe parents, for example, even when the social infrastructures are available, some people just deliberately do not go as due to their orientation. So we are going to increase campaign programs to ensure reorientation of parents, children, and educators to be able to come into the schools. In terms of the costs of implementing this policy, so these are some of the things that we would require to implement the policy. One, infrastructure development, which would involve building of schools, building of makeshift classrooms, building of training centers, and also renovation of the current infrastructure, would cost money. Learning resource centers and materials. So ensuring that there are books, computers, and things like that that the children can learn with beyond just having the physical infrastructure would also would also have economic implications. Then we would also have non-formal education and alternative learning pathways to ensure that even without the school system, their training centers. Recently, Lagos State implemented or built about 608 alternate education or learning centers to ensure that children can still access education at their convenience without stress or not having to go far away from home. So having centers that provide services like MOOCs, which is basically the mass online what's it called, open courses whereby students can just go at the comfort of their homes or even from these training centers to access educational materials or courses without having to be in the physical classroom. And then training of teachers would also require certain costs, and monitoring and evaluation of these policies after implementation would require some costs. However, despite these costs, there are benefits. There are economic benefits in terms of economic growth and development. I would show you how from a financial standpoint. Through the implementation of this policy, there will be poverty reduction. So for example, one of the contextual information that I failed to provide at the beginning is the fact that out of the over 200 million population in Nigeria, as at 2023, it was reported that over 100 million of those people are multidimensionally poor, which means they either live below $1 or $2 a day, they are unable to access education and things like that. But by providing or implementing this policy, we believe that there would be high level of poverty reduction through the implementation of this policy. And as well, other areas such as the health and well-being of the people will also be enhanced because they are more educated and may be able to practice good health principles. Social cohesion and stability would also be enhanced. And then for the government, public sector, and even for the individuals, there will be long-term savings. I would also show you how from a financial standpoint. So we have done some cost-benefit analysis. Please, the figures here are in US dollars. Also, the amounts you see here are only hypothetical. However, the core or the major lesson from this is not the major emphasis on this is not necessarily the figures, but the approach as to how we have designed or analyzed this. If you can see, I have mentioned severally about infrastructure. On the first cell or line item here, which is building of schools and digital education centers, it would cost a whole lot. For example, if we were to solve the problem of distance to education centers, it means the government would have to build as many primary schools or secondary schools in the community. Lagos State has 20 local government areas and 37 local community development areas. So at least for children to access education, it means there has to be a school or more in each of these community development areas. Now, we have not attached any figure to this because one of the approach we are going to use in implementing this policy is that we are going to collaborate with private sectors. Now, Lagos State is the economic capital of Nigeria, which means it houses most of the multinational companies in the country. So these people pay huge taxes. As a government or as an advocate, basically, or a policy practitioner here, we're recommending to the government that they can either or maybe reduce some of the taxes or give them some level of tax allowances and ensure them to commit to building schools within these communities. So for example, one company can build 1 or 2 schools within each community. This would be able to cover across the 37 local community development areas, reducing the cost of infrastructural development from the government. And then the government can also continue with other resources required, such as IT, furniture, and all of that. Some of the figures, we have planned to do this in the space of 4 years. 4 years being that is the one, as a government, that is the time span that is guaranteed for the current government. So that is in the Nigerian context, actually. So the government would, through its own budgetary allocation, focus on these other line items. So we have both the non-recurring expenditures, that is expenditures or expenses that the government wouldn't have to make annually. So probably do this once and not have to repeat doing this. However, we have broken these expenses into 4 different years. Some of the costs you might see have increased from what it was in year 1. It has increased in year 2, year 3, and in year 4. And this is because we have accounted for inflation in terms of prices of goods, cost of materials, and all that in our budgetary allocation. And then for the recurring costs, to do this, there would have to be human resources involved in terms of teachers, in terms of non-teaching staff. So we have accounted for things like salaries that would occur probably every month. This is not just annually. In total, adding both the total and the recurring and non-recurring costs, we have these total figures here as the costs that the government would have to incur in implementing these policies that we are recommending. However, there are benefits. Now, like I have mentioned, Lagos State is a state with one of the largest multinationals and even corporate organizations in the country, being the economic capital and a business viable location. So therefore, there will be taxes. But we have assumed that in tax revenue generation, in the first year, taxes might not be as high as what it would be in the fourth year. And the reason being because we have provided some tax allowances for companies to be able to also contribute to the development of the social infrastructures in the states. However, due to the savings the government would make, these taxes would grow. One, like we have mentioned, there will be more people who would be able to work as a result of increased level of education. There will be less burden on parents who would have normally paid school fees or who would have normally had to incur the cost of feeding, because some of the things our expenditure actually accounts for is feeding of the schools of the children while they are in school. So they would probably provide, the schools or the government will provide breakfast and lunch to them, which saves cost on the side of the parents. So they would have more opportunity to also contribute to the tax and the economy of the state. So definitely there will be increase in tax over the 4 years, and there would also be decreased costs in some services. For example, we are using sustainable measures in things like buses. So the government is going to be using maybe what they call it, electric buses. There would also, the schools will not be powered by fuel and diesel or gas like it is currently done. So the use of solar panel would be some of the major sources of power, reducing the cost of fuel or diesel for the government. So there will be savings on that aspect. For the sake of time, I'll just go to the summary of all of this. When we account for the costs as well as the benefits, potential benefits the government might gain in all of this, over the years, you can see that the benefits would grow from year 1 as to year 4. But in total, when you sum up all of these benefits as compared to the costs, there's more financial gains for the government by implementing this policy by year 4, basically, or even after year 4. Now, in terms of our stakeholders and target population, the government agencies, particularly those ones who are focused on education or committed or charged with promoting education, like the Ministry of Education and other sub units in that ministry, parents, private sectors, communities, and practically every stakeholder within the state will be involved. Our target population, like I have mentioned, are children between these age groups from primary to secondary school level education. In terms of expected outcomes, we expect that at the end of the 4th year, so from the beginning of the 5th year, about 50% of the number of out-of-school children, which is about 1 million people, children and youths, would have come out of the out-of-school children population. The education system will be strengthened as a result of the training that will be provided to the teachers and the quality of materials that would be provided to the schools. Then there will be enhanced economic and social development, like I have shown you from the financial perspective. When this is eventually successful, we hope that it can be replicable across Nigeria. We understand that the problems differ, but there are still similarities. Therefore, this can serve as a lesson or a learning point for the remaining 35 states in Nigeria. There will be a specific focus on some other demographics, particularly the girl child, people, marginalized children. And also, there could be expansion when the primary and secondary level is completely successful. There could be expansion to maybe the university level, where there are still lots of young people who are not in the university. But these are only potential expansion that we foresee, basically. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayo, Mide. Thank you very much, education team as a whole. We'd like to ask if any of the panelists this moment have any questions or comments towards the education team's proposal.
Thank you so much, Tim, for your well-put presentation. I really appreciate your clearly you've put in a lot of work and thought into this work, and it shows that you've done a comprehensive research, which is a really good thing to do when you're generating a policy. I have a few questions. You talked about using makeshift classes, and I was just wondering, what does that really mean in the context of Lagos? Can you define what are makeshift classes?
Okay. I thought one of my group members wanted to answer that, but if there's nobody talking, then I will just respond. In terms of makeshift classes, so two ways. Development of these classes, for example, might take time, in terms of building, allocation of land, and all that. There are current structures that are not necessarily schools that the government could lay hands on to use temporarily. Also, there are also quick structural development that could take place in terms of and are to a large extent sustainable in terms of their new designs called container homes or buildings that they could quickly put together in a couple of months rather than waiting for long-term structures. So these are some of the examples of makeshift classrooms that we are talking about. And then in some communities that within the state as well that are not so developed, where even transporting resources to these areas could be a challenge. For example, in the dry season, which is not the rainy season, there could be temporary outdoor education system that could be provided while structural developments are going on. So these are some of the examples we refer to as makeshift classrooms.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I'm just gonna go ahead and give some feedback on the presentation. I think that your policy proposal had well-defined and achievable goals that address, the problem that you have identified. I also liked how you linked the problems that are being faced in Nigeria with the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, and highlighting the causes that are identified within the challenge, particularly with like the current gaps of the current policies within Nigeria. I do want also to acknowledge the part about expansion of infrastructure being critical for increasing access. And I liked how you have also been very clear about the demographic dividends within Nigeria. You highlighted that really well, and also you're focusing specifically, putting a specific emphasis on women within the demographic of the people that are dropping out of school. So those are the things that are most liked about your presentation. Some areas of improvement that I think that you could focus on are on the objectives. I felt that you could address the need and be specific enough on how you guide the implementation itself. For example, you focus on Lagos. You highlighted the budget allocation being not enough for the whole country. You mentioned a figure of 15 to 20% budget allocation, but that's for the whole country. I was curious how much of the Lagos state budget actually goes towards education, and how much percentage increase would be required to achieve the proposals that you have in this policy. I would also have loved to see the out of school statistics and specific causes within the different legislative divisions within Lagos. As it is, you've given us a figure for the whole state, but I think I would have loved that breakdown, because implementation is going to happen in different legislative divisions with stakeholders that are local, and breaking down those figures would give us a more targeted approach to solving this problem. I really loved the cost-benefit analysis that you presented, containing the budget estimates for the things that will be required, and the potential benefits for the state. For presentation's sake, I would have loved to see a cost-benefit ratio, so breaking down those the benefits versus the cost, and I would have loved that presented in a percentage, so it's easier to communicate if you're talking to policymakers or local stakeholders. But you did a great job, and I really would like to see this some of these ideas come to fruition, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Your comments are very insightful, and I believe that they would help us for that development, to develop this proposal. Hopefully, we could go through implementation process, or they could be accepted by the government. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon, and thank you so much for the presentation. I've really enjoyed even the layout and also the content and all that. But I have a few things I can raise out of this. From your policy proposal, you really did not specialize like in Lagos. So it is like a surprise that Lagos is not the main focus. And then secondly, I feel like you're discussing about reducing out of school, but so what? I'm still struggling with the question, like, so what? Why should the government focus on this? Because even the ones who are educated, they still high rate of unemployment. So why should we care? And then also the third thing, I guess you had also mentioned that it is about inclusive and equitable quality education. And I feel like, I don't know why you chose Lagos, but I feel like from reading from your policy proposal, there was a bit of marginalized communities, people with special needs, and also children in the war zones. I feel like it's a I don't know why you focused on Lagos, but I think it would have been more interesting to see how these marginalized people, or maybe at least focus on one group. And then also in your presentation, I noted that you really went into depth about the replication of the project to other states in Nigeria or even elsewhere. But in your proposal, I guess that was not mentioned. And also in your, if I may also go back to your proposal, is that I also found the referencing not well done, and also it lacked a bit of coherence. But from your presentation, I can feel like there's a lot of energy and a lot of input that you have really put in it. And on the budget and on the cost and benefit analysis, it's good, but you also mentioned that there's low budgetary allocation from the government. So I'm just asking myself that what are other measures where we can ensure that children are going to school, and how do we cater for the non-monetary perspectives? Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the questions. I'm really trying to figure out like where to start from. They're very actually important questions you have asked, and I appreciate them. Maybe I start from why we chose Lagos as compared to other states that face more challenges in Nigeria. To be very fair with you, I agree that Lagos is not the most challenged, which I clearly mentioned in my presentation. However, Lagos still stands as one of the states with the highest number. Like I said, 2 million children in Lagos are out of school. So regardless of the fact that it doesn't really face as much level of insecurity as other challenged states with insecurity face, but Lagos could serve as a learning point to these other states faced with out-of-school children. How? The fact that because the problem of insecurity, for example, many of those other states in the north that are challenged with high level of out-of-school children, the problem is very clear in terms of insecurity. So I could as well just come and say, solve insecurity, implement the same policies, similar policies in Lagos, and it would work. It's quite clear. But also Lagos provides us, for the sake of this presentation and this study, considering the time frame that we have, Lagos provides us with more resources that we could work with in terms of speaking with stakeholders, in terms of identifying the problems as to what each of these states face beyond just what we see in paper or on paper. We're able to access more people and talk to more people from Lagos State than anywhere else. So due to these constraints, we focused on Lagos State. And there's a saying in Nigeria that if Lagos gets it, then every other state gets it, right? So that's another reason why we have focused on Lagos State, because we believe that once things happen in Lagos, it's easier to spread across the country than most other states. And Lagos is quite a diverse, Nigeria is a diverse country ethnically and religiously. So you have people who are of Islamic or Christianity religion in the country, and they are located in different regions of the country based on this ethnicity or religion perspective. But Lagos is one state that actually accommodates every of these diverse ethnic group. So therefore, working in Lagos is also a way to reach out to this diverse population of people. So that is one of the reasons why we have focused on Lagos. These are some of the reasons why we focused on Lagos. In terms of adding more flesh to the contents of our work, particularly in specifying the policy areas in Lagos, and I think we'll do that while we develop the policy further. I agree with you that there could be more added. We'll do that. We'll take it as a recommendation and do that while we develop our policy further. I really couldn't pick up like some of the other questions you had raised, but this is my answer to the two. I can lay my hands on.
What I'll ask is maybe perhaps the education team, for the sake of time, respond to some of the questions that the panelists have asked in the chat, and we'll come back to them towards the end of the session to provide enough time for all the teams to present. Thank you very much, education team. Thank you, Ayomide. We will now move on to the Entrepreneurship and Employability team. If you can begin to set up, and over to you. Just a note to the education team, there have been a couple of comments made into the chat, notably from Ezra Mugambi, Achola, and Faith Abiodun regarding ideas that you can then take on to further improve your policy proposals moving forward. I see that we're having some technical issues with the Entrepreneurship and Employability team. If you could just give us a few minutes. In the meantime, is there any quick remarks, last remarks, as we transition over Ayomide or Rachel or Ferrister or Fotsing would like to make regarding the education team?
Thank you very much. Oops. Yeah. Yeah.
I hope you can.
Well, yeah.
Yes, we can hear Samantha, but I see someone from the guests wanted to make a comment really quickly as Samantha, you continue to share your screen.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It is heavily raining where I am, and it was difficult to voice out this. I'm hoping that you can hear me. I'm Emmanuel Migabo. I had put my questions in the chat, but I'll just, for the sake of time, just raise up one. They're mostly geared towards quality of education. I like the fact that you married equitable and quality education, both. So I'll just ask the second one, and that is, what measures are included in the policy to promote gender equality in education, particularly in regions where cultural norms may pose barriers to girls' education, and how does it actively encourage the enrollment and retention of female students at all levels of education system? Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I can respond to that to some extent, and maybe point it out. Thank you for bringing it out, and I think we need to think more widely on that. But at the moment, I think what we have put in place is doing campaigns to create awareness, because I think the social cultural barriers to access to education mainly arise as a result of lack of awareness and the importance of education. So one of the ways that we've addressed that in our policy is having campaigns whereby families in rural areas where girls are not educated, all those barriers contributing to. I know we even came across an article whereby we have people, because even when we have low income households, it makes more sense for children to actually go and work other than go to school. So, but creating the awareness on the importance of education and ensuring, because again, for example, in the universal basic education policy, they pointed out that in as much as education is free, parents then are threatened to be imprisoned if they do not take their children to school, which we feel is not the best approach. The best approach would be to create awareness whereby parents can even do it out of volition, where we don't have to force parents to take their children to school, and for them to actually see the importance of education. And unfortunately, like Mudhoni had mentioned earlier, sometimes education is currently looks like it's not as promising with the rates of unemployment and all that. And I think, thank you for the remarks. We'll also include that in the policy as well as we do our revisions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We'll ask again. Thank you, education team. We'll ask again for the entrepreneurship team to share their PowerPoint. All right, it's coming up.
Sorry guys, I'm having a very terrible network. I just hope my network will cooperate now.
Yes, thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm presenting for the Entrepreneurship and Employability team. This is our team: Irene Katusime from Uganda, Ezra, Samantha, Brenda, and Julius. 52% of young people in Uganda express that they feel inadequately equipped with business skills, and this usually affects their entrepreneurship endeavors. 73% mentioned that they lack access to mentors, and usually they have no guidance on how to navigate their way into the entrepreneurship realm. According to a report by World Bank, Uganda ranks 122 out of 190 countries on the rank of the ease of doing business. This is the reason why we chose the entrepreneurship and employability to propose a framework to boost entrepreneurship among youth in Uganda. Our policy is divided into 3 objectives, with the first objective being bridging the gap by cultivating a supportive ecosystem for young Ugandan entrepreneurs. This will ensure that Ugandan entrepreneurs have access to mentors that will help them navigate the complexities of building a business. Objective number 2 is nurturing young ventures through cultivation of an entrepreneurial future through education. Objective number 3 is bridging the divide through market linkages and information access. We will dig deeper into these objectives. The following strategies are going to be used to bridge the gap to cultivate a supportive ecosystem for young Ugandan entrepreneurs. Firstly, we are going to focus on rural empowerment and entrepreneurship. This is going to be done through specialized agribusiness training for rural youth. This will enable them to explore opportunities like improving the products that they have produced in the agricultural sector, which is value addition. We also have access to agricultural loans and grants and development of a vibrant local market. This will improve the access of their products to the general population. We also have market access initiatives and international trade and connectivity. This will foster vibrant local markets in rural areas for them to be able to export their products to the outside market. Streamlining regulations, customs, and trade processes for international connectivity. This can only be enabled by creating policies that promote and reduce the barriers of exporting products to the outside world. Promotion of smooth international trade for global exposure. Strategy number 3 focuses on infrastructure development and connectivity. We are going to prioritize rural infrastructure, for example, roads, electrification, and water for market linkages. By focusing on this, we'll be able to ensure that there is a smooth flow of products from the rural areas to other markets, either in the towns or in the cities, or even beyond Uganda. Creation of industrial parks and economic zones, and also linking supply chains for a steady flow of prosperity. The following strategies are focusing on nurturing young entrepreneurs through cultivation of an entrepreneurial future through education. As mentioned in some statistics by the World Bank, the youth are felt that they are not adequately prepared in terms of the skills on how to pitch, the knowledge on how to implement strategies that can improve their businesses for them to increase income and also promote their rate of survival. So strategy number 1 is focusing on transformation of the education ecosystem. This is through integration of entrepreneurial education into the national curriculum, shifting from traditional rote learning to active engagement and practical application. And this will be enabled through teacher training and establishment of entrepreneurship centers, either at local universities, tertiary institutions, and in some cases, high schools. Collaboration and networking for real-world impact. There is need for industry partnerships, mentorship, and business incubation facilities that will bridge the gap between education and real-world insights. In addition, the strategy number 2 also focus on emphasis on financial literacy and pitching skills, enabling students to confidently engage with investors. This will enable young people or youth to take advantage of opportunities beyond investment opportunities beyond Uganda, where they can effectively pitch their business and also be adequately equipped to financially manage their business for it to be successful. Strategy number 3 focuses on government support and societal transformation. Government support will be through dedicated policy implementation and funding allocation. Also, we'll focus on a vision of transforming Uganda into a nation of creators, innovators, and entrepreneurial architects. To add on to the government support and societal transformation, currently there is a complex web of regulations and unpredictable tax regimes, which discourages many young Ugandans from venturing into the world of business. So by ensuring that government supports through policy implementation, it will enable young people and motivate them to enter into the world of business or entrepreneurship for them to effectively start and run their business. Number 3, sorry. Objective number 3, bridging the divide through market linkages and information success. Okay, yes, so I've mentioned this already. So I'll leave this time to Irene to look into the cost-benefit analysis and the other sections that follow. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Can we hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Irene Katusume. Part of the Entrepreneurship and Employability group, and I'll be presenting some of the sections. I'll start with the cost-benefit analysis. The rationale for financial and cost-benefit analysis was to provide us with a lens to consider the opportunity costs incurred by opting to commit time and resources to offering this prospective program versus the other options. And it plays a critical role in evaluating the viability and potential impact of any proposed policy, since it's directly linked to decision making, and it provides decision makers with the necessary tools to make informed choices. So since our policy aims to achieve specific objectives, such as improving public welfare through economic independence, addressing challenges such as unemployment, and stimulating economic growth through increased entrepreneurship, we realize that achieving these objectives has to be balanced with the available financial resources, hence the rationale for carrying out cost-benefit analysis. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief illustration of some of the costs that we identified that will be incurred in the implementation of this policy. And they include, but are not limited to, they are divided into 3 categories. First of all, there is mentorship program and skills development. Under this, we have mentor recruitment and training. We have training materials and workshops, and we have entrepreneurial stipends. Then we have another category of costs, which are entrepreneurship education in schools. Under this, the specific costs are teacher training and curriculum development, learning materials and resources. And then there's also bridging the market and information divide. Under this, the specific costs incurred are business development services, such as consultants, market research and access initiatives, information technology platform development. Then finally, we also have costs that will be incurred under monitoring and evaluating the progress of the policy. Under this, the specific costs, we have staff salaries and benefits and other monitoring and evaluation activities. So all these costs, we estimated over a 2-year period, because we intend to carry out a pilot study for a 2-year period. Then we evaluate the outcome of that and ascertain whether we can carry out a national rollout. So there are benefits as well, which we quantified, and they're divided into 3 as well. We have economic benefits, which include increased business revenue, new job creation, and increased tax revenues from new businesses. Then we have the social benefits, such as reduced unemployment among the youth, improved entrepreneurial skills and confidence, and increased community development through new businesses. These ones can't be quantified. These ones under social, the ones I've just mentioned. We expect a positive benefit to be derived from them, but they cannot be quantified. Then we have educational benefits. Now, under this, we'll have improved understanding of entrepreneurship among students. We'll have higher rates of self-employment and innovation. So basically, when you look at the graph that's on your screens illustrating the benefits, it seems as though there are few. It's due to the reason I've mentioned that there are some which cannot be quantified. So this graph just illustrates the ones whose benefits could be quantified over the 2-year period when we'll be carrying out the pilot study. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, in order to evaluate the effectiveness of this policy, I will evaluate it using the net present value method. Basically, this method measures the actual or the real net economic benefit of a project. And it's as simple as summing up. It's a summation of the economic benefits less like the costs. And at the end of the day, what we got was a positive figure, which can be interpreted as the policy is beneficial, i.e. the benefits exceed the costs. So that is the method that we shall use to evaluate this policy. Then we can go to the next slide. Okay, then we have the implementation strategy, timeline, and evaluation section of this policy. We have a pilot phase, which is slated to begin July 2024 to June 2026. Then we have a national rollout. Basically, this pilot study, we identify a pilot district which fits all the demographics that we are looking for. And we subject it to government evaluation and public participation of key stakeholders, after which when all this is agreed upon, then we start a pilot study in that location that we have selected. It also has a few activities/interventions which we carry out. So basically in the pilot study, we implement all the strategies that the previous speaker has talked about. However, this is on a small scale since it's still a pilot study. We establish a dedicated monitoring and evaluation team to track progress and collect the data, and also conduct regular stakeholder consultations. So the national rollout, which covers a period from July 2026 to June 2025. Now, this is based on the success of the pilot program. If the pilot program is successful, then we can proceed to a national rollout. This is usually on a larger scale. It includes activities such as enhancing skills development and training programs to cover a wider range of entrepreneurial skills. For example, digital literacy, e-commerce, and financial management. During the national rollout, we also seek to strengthen the mentorship and networking network by establishing regional and national programs. So in a nutshell, that is a timeline. However, the national rollout is also further broken down into phases, which are 4. Into 4 phases. There is a phase 1 from 2024 to 2026. Under this, we established the National Youth Entrepreneurship Fund and Support Program. And then there's also development and implementation of comprehensive skills development and training programs. Those are some of the activities that we have in phase 1. Then in phase 2, as it expands, here we have strengthening of the mentorship and networking network. And we also continue streamlining the regulatory framework as well. That phase 2 is from 2026 to 2030. Then we have phase 3, which is from 2031 to 2035. Under phase 3, we expect to consolidate all the gains and expansion to support youth entrepreneurship and also foster a supportive ecosystem for sustainable business growth. That is in phase 3. Then in phase 4, basically this is monitoring and evaluation of youth entrepreneurship or national development. Then we have continuous adaptation and improvement of youth entrepreneurship policies and programs, and then positioning Uganda as a global leader in youth entrepreneurship and innovation. So that's the breakdown of the 4 phases of the national rollout. Next slide, please. We've covered that. Next slide, please. So as is with any policy, it has implications, and these can be both positive and negative. However, entrepreneurship and employment, this entrepreneurship and employment policy will provide a solution to most of the pressing societal problems, because entrepreneurship is often seen as a solution to problems such as unemployment, poverty, environmental degradation, and inequality. So entrepreneurs will have the ability and capacity to identify problems and come out with innovative solutions, which will help address some of the most pressing challenges in Uganda and the world at large. That's one of the positive implications. 2, we could have job creation and economic growth, which will be one of the most significant impacts of entrepreneurship of this policy on society, because when entrepreneurs start companies, they hire employees to help with several tasks and responsibilities, and this increases job opportunities and reduces unemployment. And at the end of the day, this boosts the economy. However, on the other side of the coin, like I said, impact could be both positive and negative. Much as entrepreneurship will have a positive impact, there is a possibility that it could worsen the inequality situation in the country. The rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. So there's also the risk of that as an impact of the policy. Then 2, there is a possibility of because entrepreneurship has an impacts which are very complex on society. They are complex and multifaceted, so it's like a double-edged sword. So there's also a negative impact rather, which could be erosion of traditional norms as well. That's a possibility as well. Next slide, please. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Entrepreneurship and Employability team. We'll now invite the panelists to ask questions. I'd like to ask in this instance, since Lukman didn't go first last time, if Lukman could start, and then we'll continue from there. Lukman, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Netraya, and all Future Africa team for organizing these policy proposals presentations. So let me begin by, first of all, thanking the Entrepreneurship and Employability team for such wonderful work. I will be very brief, and I will talk about I will start with the strengths of this presentation and the policy, and then I would ask maybe a few questions and some improvements to be made on the policy. So starting with the good note, these guys have done the rate of unemployment in Uganda and how would that be reduced through entrepreneurship. So, and amazingly, they did good rollout strategies, which I think if utilized well, will really good against fighting unemployment. So more than that, I'll just highlight some few areas where some improvements could be done. First of all, I didn't see any policy gap, and that might put some doubt on the policy. We might be doing a repetition of what has already been done. So a thorough research of what has already been done and the existing gap is truly significant. So I hope the team could look at that again. And we understand that entrepreneurship is such a large, and every policy should also have importance to run and implement. See that in the documents shared, noted down, and could be reflected in the later edition. And then more importantly, I would talk about the power of private sector in increasing entrepreneurship among youth in Uganda and in Africa at large. And that was not very visible in the policy framework. So most of the effort has been placed on the government, and we already know what governments could do. So we want to shift the question from what governments can do to what private sector and locally owned industries can do. So that could also be another area of improvement for the team. And then finally, when we come to budgeting and financing, very much cost has been placed and given to education, to teach training, to material development. And that doesn't really answer the question of entrepreneurship. I thought other areas like startup financing and investing in ideas could be the best area where investments could be made to. So I think that kind of shift is somehow important at this stage. So instead of focusing so much on teaching and training young people on entrepreneurship, I think the practical way is more important at this stage to really do something about unemployment in the country. Because I understand a country like Uganda, majority of youth are literate and most of them have good opportunity to study, but still that does not answer the question of employment. So instead of placing so much budget and so much revenue to educate young people about entrepreneurship, we could focus on the other side on giving them seed funding, on startup financing development, and some sort of that. And finally, this is just a comment. Maybe the team could have another way to respond to it, but the pilot district has not been mentioned. And the question would be, if you didn't mention the district, then how would the implementation be derived from this policy? So I think it's very important to make everything clear in the policy proposal, because we are proposing a policy to boost entrepreneurship in this district as a pilot. So we don't have to wait for the government again to come in to decide what area or what city or what district to be invested in. So I think that's also another area where the team could look. But overall, the presentation has been extremely good, and the policy that has been proposed is so much effort has been put in. I thank the team for making this possible and for putting all this effort. So I just want to stop here and thank you all.
Thank you, Lukman. We'll invite other panelists to also share their thoughts.
I can go next. And thank you so much, Tim, for your presentation. I loved how clear your proposal is as I was reading it. And particularly the bit about including the youth demographics in Uganda and breaking down those dividends and how they can be used as an advantage to try and address the problem of entrepreneurship and employment. I liked how you broke down the constraints that current entrepreneurs are facing and those would-be entrepreneurs as well, and they provided a clear, feasible path for solutions to addressing such problems. You also had very clear objectives and strategies for achieving the said objectives. You talked about skills development and startup support mechanisms, as well as entrepreneurship centers for training and mentorship, and that is a very well-articulated plan for addressing the gaps that exist in current policies. I think that I would have to disagree with my colleague that even though you did not mention the gaps that you've identified in this presentation, but I think they are highlighted in the actual proposal. So I would encourage you for future presentations to include that in the presentations, because you have to articulate this to the audience, especially in a panel like this. I loved the passion on inclusion that you've included in your proposal, particularly with strategies to address the gender constraints that female entrepreneurs face, and also your emphasis on addressing challenges that youth in rural areas are facing, because that's where you see the greatest potential, because most of the population in Uganda, all of youth live in rural areas, and there are a lot of resources in rural areas. So it sounds like a really low-hanging fruit to build off of, which I really think is a no-brainer. And the tax incentives that you're proposing, I think those are very critical to addressing the barriers to business, and also highlight some of the the gaps that exist in current policies in Uganda. Finally, I also liked your detailed monitoring and evaluation strategy. However, I would like to suggest the methodology for monitoring and evaluation to be a little more scientific, rather than just recording from periodic surveys that you mentioned. I would like to see if you could possibly employ what we call randomized control trials, so that you're actually measuring the actual impact rather than things that are observed. Happy to share more written feedback on this, but in a way that for most policies and how you measure, you have to measure the impact by assuming what could have happened if this policy intervention was not introduced. So that way you actually know what we call the counterfactual. Instead of measuring the observed changes, you should actually be measuring the counterfactual. So you should employ randomization in your monitoring and evaluation, and that's the most effective and close to the truth of the impact that you can measure. I had one or two questions to end with. First of all, what is the most important challenge that you anticipate in implementation of this policy, and how do you plan to overcome it? And then the other question is on, under the proposed youth-led businesses that you lay out, I'm curious, what's the rationale behind the prioritization of these areas that you list? For example, you list agricultural technologies, and you list information and communication technology, renewable energy and sustainable technologies. What prompted you to highlight these areas as a priority and not others? Thanks.
Okay. I think the reason why we chose this is, I'll answer the last question, especially for ICT. It's like they're not necessarily new, but they're underutilized or underexplored sectors, especially in the African context. So by taking advantage of these opportunities in the African sector, we can actually create more employment or create more opportunities of bringing in income into the country and hence create more employment, especially under ICT, where we have software and app creation, e-commerce and digital marketing, and now we have AI and other different fields coming into under technology. So by utilizing this, we'll be able to tap into the unexplored sectors, especially in African context. And then for agri-technology and value addition, unfortunately, I don't have the statistics for Uganda, but most African countries actually export raw materials and then in turn import their manufactured products. So at the end of the day, we are on the losing end because we are buying the things at a higher price, yet we are the suppliers of the raw materials. So by focusing on agri-technology and value addition, we are trying to also tap into the opportunity of creating more ways of adding value to the natural resources that we have or natural products that we have so that we can bring in more income. Thank you.
I can respond to the first question in behalf of our group. So Abel, thanks, and thanks, Lukman too. So there's a question about the most important challenge that we expect and how we propose to address it. In the development of our policy, when you are sort of going through asking questions and having conversations with different people who we met and also people from Uganda, one of the key things that we realized is the financing of agriculture, the financing of sort of the youth employment and all that. There's so many schemes where the government has thrown in money. So financing to them is not really much of an issue. There is the parish schemes, there is the YPEL schemes that were there already in Uganda. So they sort of had a lot of money in place. But even the money, they had the money for sort of season that you financed for 2 years. But after that, there was really no benefits for them to carry forward. They really didn't know how to account. They really didn't know how to do the tax process. They really didn't have any learning, sort of peer learning from that process. So the biggest issue we found out is that mentorship is really lacking to actually have them absorb these funds and actually get a track record of how to carry forward their legacy from the moment they get the funds, invest them, employ people, get to know how to do the records and how to sort of develop a business from the small funds that they've received. So the biggest challenge that we anticipate is sort of culture and assumptions in terms of the entrepreneurial culture in Uganda. There is a very huge challenge in terms of the entrepreneurial nature and culture that is there. People are not used to the entrepreneurship status of having to keep the records, having to do the taxation. Like taxation is not sort of a big issue. There's sort of corrupt mechanism of I can get this by doing this rather than having it done the right way. So there is sort of a culture that we sort of have a lot of work to do. That's the reason why we've sort of invested a lot of money in terms of mentorship, in terms of education, in terms of training for them to know from an early stage that this is how the process works. This is how sort of the road to success in terms of entrepreneurship has to go and has to take its process. And then on answering the second question, as Samantha has mentioned, in terms of prioritization, most of these topics that we've picked up, it's more of the interests of the youth in Uganda that have those, most of the youth in Uganda have interest in ICT and in some aspects like agriculture and value addition. They sort of really invested in having to see these things, either give them a little bit of money or support them, or they've been involved in them sort of not willingly, but since birth because their parents or families have been involved in these things. Then for some things like renewable energy and sustainable technologies, the country itself is sort of in the equator. So there is sort of a lot of geothermal energy, there is a lot of solar power energy that they can sort of pick up as low hanging fruits and use that as entrepreneurship sort of basin for them to step through into the ladder of entrepreneurship going forward. So yeah, that's my response for that too. Thanks.
Thanks for addressing the question. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Abel. Maloney, would you have any comments before I open up to the wider community?
No, thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Maloney. Achola? Dina? Are you with us? There we go. All right.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much, Ntaranya, and thank you to the team that has presented. I would like to make an inquiry whether prior to writing this policy proposal, there was research done with regard to the existing government interventions to improve youth livelihoods and entrepreneurship, because Uganda has ideally implemented some interventions like EMIOGA and the parish development model that ideally hands out cash to young people to fund their startups and other entrepreneurship programs that they have in communities. However, a number of these have not gone past the battle of just getting the cash. The monitoring and evaluation part of it is not satisfactory. And if you do research and go deeper into it, young people who receive these monies do not implement what it is meant for. And so it drives me to ask, how will this policy proposal bypass the existing mentality among young people to depend a lot on cash handouts rather than implementation? And then also, you mentioned something to do with capitalizing on ICT. And I would like to let you know that Uganda has a concentration of ICT enthusiasts in mostly the urban areas. And once you get into the rural areas, some areas are not yet even connected. So how will this policy address also the infrastructural shortfalls that come with implementation of IT intensive programs? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Gina. I will answer that. For your first question, you talked about whether we have done some research in previous programs. Yes, we did some research and we discovered, like you mentioned, that some projects were initiated, but like you mentioned, the money could not be accounted for. This is why in his response, Ezra mentioned that we're looking at mentorship and education in order to change mindsets. So, and for the implementation, we are going to be looking at that. When he talked about mentorship, we hope that if they had the mindset of taking the money and not using it, through mentorship and the education, they are going to have a change of mindset. And not only that, we are going to be monitoring. We are going to see that the money invested provides dividends. Thank you.
Well, as you Fonteranya, the only thing I can add to that also, then when it comes to the conversation around capitalizing on ICT, and sure, the problem is there are very few roads, there's very few electricity access in most of the rural areas. In our proposal, we've sort of had a conversation around an objective in bridging the divide through market linkages and information access, and we're really proposing having a sort of agricultural hubs in some of these rural areas. And I've proposed some of the roads that we've looked into in terms of agricultural development in Uganda, and how that can be linked to some of the major regional industries, regional markets, and even the urban centers. And we've proposed a number of roads that we think that if these roads are sort of developed by the government, it's sort of going to improve the economic outlook of the local area itself, and also the national outlook in terms of exports and the local economy by itself. So we understand, and we have done the research to actually find out that the roads are not well connected, electricity is not everywhere, but even in the people in the rural areas, you find that their urge and their interest in terms of ICT and sort of making their work easier by using technology is really, really on the highest order at the moment. So if you could take advantage of that, and the government could sort of create an enabling environment by building roads in these areas, and that we've sort of highlighted, and sort of providing electricity access, and even if not to the entire community, but some of the hubs that we've just said that they could create sort of entrepreneurship hubs and industrial parks in sort of specific areas that can, and special economic zones can really be good to help spark that ICT growth and capitalize the outputs of that at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ezra and Brenda. Thank you. Back to you, Nteranya.
Thank you very much, Chola. Thank you very much to Entrepreneurship and Employability team. We will now move forward and ask the National Resource Management team to share their presentation and begin the presentation. Over to you, National Resource Management team.
Thank you, Taranya. I hope I'm clear. Naomi, I think I've lost the slide.
All right, sure. Yes.
Right. Sorry.
Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Namoka Aisha. I come from Uganda, and I am team lead for Natural Resource Management team. Why we chose this policy is quite simple and short. We realized that the problem in African countries is not lack of laws or policies. We already have policies, but our major problem is implementation. And that policies that have been put in place are poorly implemented, or some are not even implemented at all. So due to the resource constraints we had as a team, we decided to focus on an area that has been partially implemented, but not effectively. And that is why we decided to suggest this policy on Somalia's sustainable management. Sorry. That's why we decided to choose this policy on sustainable management of water resources in African arid regions, focusing on Somalia, a specific region called Puntland in Somalia. Why Somalia? Because Somalia has been examined by the United Nations Food and Agriculture sector of the UN to have Why Somalia is because the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has already had a system put in place to handle this issue. However, in an area of 200 people, only, for example, one borehole is given to those people. So with the problem they have of harsh climates and lack of water, they, despite of being provided with water resources, these water resources are inadequate and barely cater for the population in that area. Therefore, based on what is already there, we decided to suggest this policy on to improve the already put in place system. Over to you, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Aisha. My name is Sharon Solite from Kenya. So I'm going to be looking at the policy components. So our overall objective in this policy is to increase the accessibility of clean water supply by all communities, especially the marginalized and at-risk groups in Somalia. This will be women, children, and the marginalized groups that are at the borders or the peripheries of the country. So our indicators will be change in the extent of water accessibility to all communities over time. So if you looked at our logical framework, you would see that we are looking at a target of almost 80% accessibility. Then our second indicator would be percentage of marginalized communities and at-risk groups with access to water. So if you could just move on to the next slide, Naomi. Thank you. So our key areas of focus, the goal, of course, is equitable access. Then another focus that we'll be looking at is climate resilience, aiming to improve how well water management and infrastructure can withstand and adjust to the effects of climate change, such as persistent droughts. So as my colleague, my comrade Aisha had said, the problem in African countries is not mostly the issue of lack of water. It's more of the sense of lack of water management. So if we can create resilience or mitigating factors, then we're going to reduce like runoff waters, which would allow most of the communities to withstand droughts. Then we also have a goal of effective resource management to encourage sensible water use through conservation and rainwater collection. So one of the biggest issues in Somalia currently is actually runoff water due to the bareness of the land. So if we can create ways in which we can mitigate this by improving land cover, the same thing that Kenya has done through the 10% tree cover, this will allow retention of water into near the surface level and also allow retention of water through like collecting in tanks and all of that. Then of course, to reach this, we need investments to build, maintain, and expand water infrastructure through infrastructure development. So one of the main focus that Aisha will bring forward when we talk about the stakeholders is we're looking at the people to finance, who will be able to finance the infrastructure needed for water conservation and rainwater collection and good water governance. How will we get these investments? Then, so that will be through INGOs, through international bodies like EU, World Bank. Then we'll also look at ahead issues of, sorry, I don't know who's that removed. Bitcoin. Anyway, so we're looking at the people who can finance this. So this is the private sector and the international sector. Then the value of incorporating local people in decision-making and project implementation is highlighted by community engagement. So we're looking at incorporating the social community because, of course, we cannot have a project that will be run in a community. For sustainability, we have the community we leave it to the community to sustain it. So unless we have the community working with us, we are unable to implement this project. Then the goals of governance reforms are to improve stakeholder collaboration, accountability, and transparency. So we're looking at involving the local authorities, which is the Somalia government and the mayors. This would allow us to properly implement this. Thank you so much, everyone. Naomi, please, you can take over.
Thank you so much, Sherry and Aisha. So for our time frame, we are looking at a 5-year plan, and we want to understand like regional water concerns and goals of Puntland that is in Somalia. So for the first implementation phase, we are going to look at 1 to 6 months. And in these 1 to 6 months, we are going to see the evaluation of needs and involvement of stakeholders. This is to comprehend Puntland's water difficulties and do a thorough requirement assessment, and also to determine and involve important parties such as local governments and the NGOs, partners in the commercial sector, and even the communities. And also in this period of 1 to 6 months, we are going to have a look at the creation and approval of policies, and that is to create the framework for the water management policy based on the best practices and the stakeholders' input and research. Also, we are going to see the building capacity, because we want to analyze the capabilities that local organizations and relevant government entities have in place, and also create and carry out initiatives that is to increase the capacity of technical personnel and government employees and community elders. For our second phase, we are going to have a look at 7 to 18 months. And in this period, we are going to choose a place, determine a place where determine the pilot site, taking into account community involvement, and that is agriculture demands and water shortage. And also we have to think about a range of socioeconomic and geographical situations. And also development of infrastructure, that is we start like building structures in child locations, also install irrigation systems and water storages facilities and drilling of wells. We'll also deal with awareness and participation in the community. So at this point, we're going to organize community workshops to educate the locals about the initiative. We are also going to provide channels for community involvement and feedback, and launch education programs about the sustainable use of water. We will also have framework for monitoring and evaluating. And in this point, we are going to create a foundation for monitoring and evaluation, and that is also provide instruments for gathering and analyzing data in the pilot regions. Also educating community members and employees on how we are going to gather the data and procedures and all that. At this point, also within the 7 to 18 months, we are going to have legal compliance and obtaining permissions, because we cannot carry out the project without getting legal compliance and permission within the specified place. And that means we are going to create and simplify the water usage permit process, verify adherence to regional laws and ordinance, and also give farmers and companies advice on how to get the permits. So the third piloting phase is between 19 months to that 6 months, that is assessment of performance. And at this point, we'll evaluate the effects on community well-being, that is agricultural output and even the water availability, and adapt tactics on light of the results of the evaluation. Also planning at scale, that means we examining whether expanding the program to further, Puntland's region is feasible, and determine partners and finance sources of for the period of full-scale deployment. The fourth phase is completely integrating, now starting the water management policy full-scale adoption, and also increasing the development of infrastructure and include, key locations, and also developing capabilities and training at this point, maintaining the technical staff, community leaders, and even government officials, and capacity building. At this point also, we are going to work on sustainability indicators, that is put policies in place to guarantee the activities of water management to ensure that they are sustainable, and even investigate forms of community-based management and public-private partnerships. Also on the impact indicators, we are going to see on the percentage growth in the number of people who have access to dependable clean water and water resources, and even percentage increase on how percentage increase in income levels for farmers and even businesses in water dependent sectors. For financial parts, at this point, it's estimated cost budget, and we're going to, it's in dollars, and in the total estimated cost budget, we projected it to be around $300 million and something on the top. And at this point, it will entail development, water infrastructure, human resource monitoring and evaluation, outreach and community. We have regulatory compliance, and we have overhead cost, we have the miscellaneous and all that. So all of these will cost about $300 million, and on each part has their own cost. I mean, for the water infrastructure, it has its own costs. For the water infrastructure, we are projecting about $475,000, and I mean, I'm not going to project it here, but on the document we have everything in place. On the cost benefit analysis, this is a non-profit project, so that means there's no, I mean, there's no profit that will be incurred here. What will happen is the community will benefit from it, completely benefit from it. So to guarantee its thorough and effective execution, the sustainable water resource management within the place that is Puntland will receive finance from a variety of sources. So in this place, we are going to rely on grants, and the first step will be concentrating and getting assistance from NGOs, that is the World Bank, the United Nations, and other non-governmental groups that specialize in sustainable development and water management. And some efforts will be made to work in partnership with the Somali government and local communities in order to distribute these budgets and apply for funding from national development funds. Another thing also will be, alongside community-based organization and NGOs, will facilitate fundraising activities, CSR initiatives from commercial corporations, and within the region will also be looked into. And also the project will have a flexible finance plan that will draw from a variety within provided funds, and that will be required through the course of 5 period. I mean the timeline, the time frame of the project, and to ensure that there's a success within possible stakeholders. So for the benefits, we by offering dependable and safe water supplies to undeserved communities, the water resource management will seek to address a crucial component of social fairness And in addition, the initiatives aim to seek the vulnerability, of water shortage caused by climate change, and even guaranteeing a stable and sustainable ways of sustainable ways, and also through increased water use efficiency. The program will encourage resource preservation, and also the project will also emphasize building up and expanding the water infrastructure in order to improve the distribution and make water resource more accessible. For the benefit of the participating communities as a whole, it is imperative that there's some stronger governance mechanisms that should be incorporated in order to promote more transparent and efficient management of resources, and also increase stakeholders' trust and promote sustainable practices. So I'll welcome Aisha to continue from there.
Thank you, Naomi and Sherry. I'll go on to the stakeholders. Our first stakeholder is the Somaliland Ministry of Planning and Development, which is in charge of the national planning of Somaliland. And this ministry will also be key in sharing national development plans, reports, and statistics, as well as information about the regions of Somaliland, especially Puntland. The ministry has also done previous work with the European Union and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations on a similar project in Hargeisa. The project was called the Integrated Land and Management of Water. It launched in 2019, and there has been some work on it. So that would be a key stakeholder in this policy. The second key stakeholder is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. It established the Somali Water and Land Information System, which has been working in collaboration with the Somaliland government since 2003. And it has been working with 12 government ministries and agencies in managing land and water monitoring networks, and established a robust system for land and water management in Somaliland, which is currently now in its fourth phase. However, not in the region. We propose to implement this policy in. So the Food and Agriculture Organization, why is a stakeholder, is because it shall provide us with relevant data and information around the operations in promoting integrated water and land management, climate smart agriculture food systems. And it shall also be very helpful to understand how the Food and Agriculture Organization has integrated its global strategic frameworks centered around a policy that is like ours. Then our third stakeholder is the Somaliland Ministry of Water and Mineral Resources, which has been charged with a mandate to manage freshwater resources and services. This ministry is actually very key because it's a leading agency for water and sanitation and hygiene sector in Somaliland. It shall also be relevant in sharing the ministry's process towards providing access to clean, adequate, and affordable facilities to the Somaliland citizens, particularly the area we are seeking to implement this policy in. Then the fourth is the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources in Somalia. It was established in 2014 and has the mandate to explore, develop, and distribute on equitable basis to the Somali society. This ministry shall be relevant in providing the applicability of the Somaliland Water Act 2010 to the citizens of Somaliland and its effects to the citizens. Additionally, the ministry shall help provide information on statistics in its efforts to provide clean water resources with quality services in Somaliland to help in aiding our implementation and simplifying it. And then the society, to particularly put the Puntland society, because if you cannot bring a policy for people who are not welcome to it, otherwise implementation is going to be quite difficult for you. The society goes to the society itself, the members of the Puntland community, and the civil societies that have been doing work in this area as well. Then the media also is important in sharing experiences and stories. This and the academia help mostly in formulation of the actual full policy and aiding in implementation, because they know more about the area, other people, and ways implementation is made difficult, or how it's made easier. Then finally, the policy implications and expansion possibility. Our first is enhancing. Please, the next slide. Naomi. The first policy implication and the first policy implication is enhancing resilience and sustainable practices in feminine management. As the sixth sustainable development goal, there are various things that it should be able to handle once it's tackled. The principles related to climate change adaptation, efficient job creation and increased water availability, enhanced water resilience and improved access to water resources within the context of a feminine and management sustainability. This is sort of an obvious implication. Because once it's actually handled the way my previous discussants have, and implementation is successful, the direct result would be enhanced resilience. Then the second and last one is, strengthening integrated water resource management. We discussed earlier that the problem in Somaliland, or Puntland in particular, is not lack of policy, but there is a policy that was implemented, but the effects of implementation were not felt by the community because it was small. The effect was quite small. So if our policy is implemented, it will strengthen integrated water resource management because it will ensure a wider distribution of water. It will ensure that more people get access to water, and it will ensure realization of the sixth sustainable development goal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much to the Natural Resource Management team. We'd like to now call upon the panelists to present any questions they have and comments.
Okay, so maybe I would go first. Thank you very much, team, for putting up such a very wonderful policy. It's interesting to see like a study or a policy targeting where I'm currently living and working from. So it's really been inspiring to see all this research and so much about the reality on ground. So thank you very much for that. It's been very interesting, and your policy has so much effort that can be seen from your presentation and from the document as well. So it also has a very strong background, giving details about the current and the past perspectives of managing water and other resources in the country. And it's also very interesting to see that you have picked an area where there has been so much water shortage in the past 20-30 years. So that also shows the kind of interest you guys have had to really do a policy that will be not only reflective but also practical. I just wanted to put across one question for the team, and it's this: you've put so much focus on the water shortage, but we also know from the past experience that we are not only dealing with water shortage, but sometimes we are dealing with excess water. We have so many flash floods and river floods in the country. And in the year of 12 months, 6 months we are suffering from shortage of water, and 6 months we are dealing with flooding and excess water. So did you also try to focus on how can we use the water that comes through the rain and through the river to sustain the country and the state for the next 6 months, which are dry season? So I just wanted to look if you guys have had that kind of perspective in your research. Thank you.
And also, if I may come in, thank you so much for the presentation, and also thank you so much for the work that you have done, especially in giving a reflection of the water situation in Somalia. But for me, my main question will also go on the cost benefit analysis. I feel like more can be done into that. Some things may not be monetary quoted, but also quoting the benefit of such monetary values. Like if people have access to clean water, maybe there may be less waterborne diseases or increase in agriculture and other things. So I still feel like the cost and benefit analysis can be done in a better way. Yeah, thanks.
My feedback is mainly on your title and specifics in the proposal. I felt like your title was very broad. You're focusing on this particular arid area within Somalia, which is Puntland. But your title has African arid regions in it. So I would recommend revising that to reflect that you're working within Somalia and not across Africa. So something like sustainable water resource management in Somalia's arid regions. That's more specific to the area in which you're working, and also highlights that you might scale your pilot throughout Somalia. And then I liked how you included the impact indicators. So that shows that you have a plan for impact evaluation. However, I did not see any percentages of the current situation under each of those indicators. So if you don't have those numbers, you should at least include your plan on how you're going to get them. So are you going to get this assessed in the pre-implementation phase? And if so, you should include that, so that when you measure your impact, you can then compare it with your baseline numbers that you should have at this stage. Your research was very comprehensive, and that's to agree with my fellow panelists here, is that you have done a lot of literature review on studies that have been done in Somalia on water and water resource management. I felt that a lot of that research was academic, and I saw very few references to current policies. So even though the gaps in policies are mentioned in your proposal, there was little reference to which policies you're referring to, and a description on how the current policies fail to address the challenges in water resource management. However, your challenges were articulated, and you listed like what type of water resources you're trying to address, whether it's water for whether it's water for agricultural or potable water. I thought that because the management of water resources is very dependent on the source, so you could have emphasized a little bit more on the strategies, breaking down the strategies on how intend to intervene on the water sources? So if it's an aquifer, for example, underground water, how do you plan to, how does this policy address or plan to address the challenges with regards to management of those aquifers? And do the same thing for rivers and lakes, and surface water. You did mention a little bit about the surface water through water harvesting techniques, but I thought that you did not do as a good job for these other water sources. I would also give similar feedback that I gave to the previous team on monitoring and evaluation. You should have some text about what method you plan to use on this. Although it's included in your budget, we don't see how exactly you arrived at those estimated numbers, because the budget should obviously reflect what impact evaluation methodology you're going to use. And one more feedback on your implementation strategy. I thought that it didn't articulate the specific activities to be conducted. For example, instead of presenting us with a plan for how you engage stakeholders, you suggest that you plan you plan during the implementation strategy phase to go on the ground and assess how to engage stakeholders. So I want to see that now in the policy proposal based on the background research that you have done. And you can indicate that you would do further needs assessment surveys to better understand your implementation activities. But I need to see the basic strategy on how you plan on engaging these different stakeholders in the proposal itself. And finally, I was just curious because Somalia is not the only arid or semi-arid area or country within North Africa. There are also other similar countries. I wonder what policies have worked in neighboring countries. For example, I know, for example, in Niger, there has been a huge success on water harvesting techniques known as demi-lunes for farmers. Particularly, they harvest water in their fields, and it helps with farming and yield. It solves the water problem on farms because it's a low-cost native technology that doesn't require a huge amount of cost and very low maintenance. I wonder if we can look at examples like that from neighboring countries in the region and propose those in our policy. Back to you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if NRM team wants to respond to any of the comments made.
Yes, thank you so much, Nteranya. I would like to start with Mr. Lukman. So we addressed the issue of excessive water through water harvesting and water storage. This is through harvesting of runoff water into large tanks that will be used within the years. Then I would also like to reply to Madam Muthoni. Thank you so much for your comment. We'll definitely try to add more on the outcomes and the implications that we expect from this policy. Then I would move on to Mr. Abel. You've spoken about us having a broad topic. First of all, thank you so much for your comments and insight. Our topic was a bit broad, but we definitely narrowed it down to sustainable water management in Somalia. I don't know if we need to consult you more on on being more specific. Then on our indicators, thank you again for the comment on the indicators. You've said that we've not brought in the indicator percentages. So in our logical framework in the full document, this is in, but we thought that not to burden the PowerPoint, we reduced a few of the, but this is definitely something to look at. Maybe you can tell us if the percentages that we have are feasible or not. Then you spoke about the pre-implementation phase, about whether we are going to have a baseline study. So it's very hard to come by Somalian data that is actually current. So what we would love to do in this policy is basically do a baseline study before the beginning of the policy, probably 2 to 3 months prior. Then also replying to your comment on research, the research was very academic. So this is definitely something that we should look at. Again, I would like to still address the lack of enough data on Somalia available online. But since we have Mr. Lukman here, I think we can reach out to you for more data on this. You asked what the water was for. Is it irrigation or what is it for? So I would like to mention that the water is mostly for pastoralism. That's why we're not looking at all the deep irrigation systems that we can create, whether we have these canals of moving water into farms and all of that. We're looking at water for pastoralism, as most of the communities in Somalia are into animal keeping and most of them are pastoralists. So that is definitely something to consider as a highlight. Then on your final comment on the engagement of stakeholders, thank you so much again for this insight. I feel like I've overlooked on explaining how we would engage these stakeholders, but then we will definitely add it to our final draft on the modes of stakeholder engagement. And I would appreciate the three of you for all your comments. I think they were very insightful, very educational. Thank you so much. Back to you, Nteranya.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the team, NRM team. We're going to ask the panelists to give their final comments. We'll go in the order of Muthoni, Lukman, and Mr. Mkulama. Abel, sorry, pardon me. In this instance, we'll also launch a survey for all our guests who also like to provide any feedback they have. I'm asking, given that we've now gone 20 minutes over time, if the panelists can be brief, just giving a general overview of feedback they think from having seen the presentations on all three teams. So if Muthoni could go first, please.
Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed the session and also to hear the different policy proposals. So for me, I guess the greatest is to see the match between what was presented today and the policy proposal, because I feel like there's a mismatch, and not just in one group, like across the groups. I guess that's what I may mainly say for now. And I look forward to doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muthoni. I'll invite Lukman.
Okay, thank you very much, Netraya, for the amazing work, and for all the three teams for doing wonderfully great, talking about education, entrepreneurship, and water are critical matters in our continent, and developing policies that reflect the needs of our society is also critically significant. So thank you all. You guys have done great. We look forward to giving you back your documents with a few comments, and I just want to explore you all to not leave your policy proposals in your folders, but we take also the initiative to share it with the wider audience of the continent. Might be someone somewhere will make use of your policy proposal, and that might be a good start of you and the country as well. So thank you guys for the amazing work, and we look forward to meeting in our other sessions, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lukman. Abel?
Thank you. Really want to appreciate all of the teams for a good job well done. This is very impressive work, and I appreciate you working and selecting these very important problems for our continent. And I would like to encourage you to incorporate the feedback and also continue to develop, very innovative policy proposals for our continent. And I'd like to wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. We've come to the end of our time together here at the Policy Presentations. As we conclude, I'd just like to make a couple of remarks to everybody. Future Africa Fellowship is concluding its third cohort. Applications will be open by the end of the month for those who are joining us for the first time. Please do look out for those to join the fourth cohort and perhaps propose your own policies next year around this time. We'd like to take this time to thank a few people who have made it possible for us to be here in the ways that we are today. Individual contributors throughout the fellowship program. These include Dr. Caroline Lumosi, Catherine Urura, Judith Juma, Godson Nwanko, Ayoka Mioyemi, Eme Inyeku, Achola Dina, Tricia Nabaye, Falila Abdularazak, Ayanda Manjumani. Additionally, we'd like to thank part of our Future Africa staff team who, without, we would not have this Future Africa curriculum. Elizabeth Obode, Olem O'Brien, and our founder, Faith Abiodun, who's here with us today. To our panelists, Abel Mkulama, Lukman Yassin, and Mudhoni Kaho, thank you very much. Your feedback is invaluable. We hope that our fellows take that into stride and are able to grow into their policies. We will definitely be reaching out to you again just to get some more concrete advice on what you've said today here. But we are very grateful for sacrificing your time to be able to make this a possibility and and make their progress move forward. And of course, to the fellows who have gone through the year struggling day in, day out to make these policy proposals come true. I hope you're able to exhale now for a bit because the work still continues. But congratulations to you all. This would not have been possible without you guys. And so thank you very much. Our guests, thank you for attending today. With that said, we're grateful to all of you and we wish you all a pleasant rest of your weekend and take care and see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.